David Brewster here, new episode of Chordplay, and this is the Chords of Focus, and I've had some requests to feature music from this legendary band. I've also had requests for more prog rock, and as I've admitted multiple times sitting in this chair talking into this camera, I'm a huge prog rock fan, or scholar, or nerd, whatever you want to call me. I have discovered there's a fine line between scholar and nerd. I think I lean a little bit more on the nerd side, which is unfortunate, but whatever. But Focus actually formed in Amsterdam in 1969, and then following the release of their 1971 album Moving Waves, which features the song Hocus Pocus, that song just blew up. It hit the charts, sold records, they definitely put the band on the map. And I think yodeler fans all over the world rejoiced when they heard that song. They were like, hey, it's a prog rock song with yodeling. No way. Very interesting, unusual band, and definitely I'm excited to finally feature this band on the channel, so here we go. So in the guitar department in Focus's music, at least the original incarnation of the band, they have broken up and reformed numerous times, but the original guitarist, Jan Akkerman, that's who most people associate with the band, even though he technically left the group in 1976, and he came back I think in the 90s and maybe like in the early 2000s. But, Jan was the guitarist, on Hocus Pocus and all those famous songs and albums in the early years. I think he played for the band, from 69 until 76. And they've continued. They did technically break up in 78, and then they reformed, I think, like in the late 80s or early 90s. And then they broke up and reformed. And I think they've definitely been kind of this new version of the band since 2002. But, like I said, most people, when they think of Focus, they think of Jan Akkerman. Definitely a great guitarist, electric, acoustic, classical, and some jazz and stuff. Very impressive guitarist, for sure. So the chord bass and rhythm guitar parts in this episode came from 4 Focus albums, and we're hitting the early years, the 70s, incarnation with Jan Akkerman on guitar. No offense to the other incarnations and albums that came after that. But like I just admitted, most people think of Jan Akkerman when they think of Focus. That's who I think of. And since this is the first time I've featured the band here on the channel, I did include Focus in the progressive rock chord play episode like a year or two ago. But this is the first time I've actually, targeted Focus the band. So anyway, here's the image with the album covers where the music in this lesson came from. So with the opening, that's the very famous Hocus Pocus from the album Moving Waves. That's the first song I'd ever heard from this band. And Gary Hoey fans probably recognize that too. Gary Hoey covered that in the 90s, like an instrumental version. But a very famous riff. And it's cool to notice like a rock out riff with chord changes. Like there's more than just some power chords moving around. Jan was actually like laying out some chords like this. Something like that. I actually shorten it just for the demonstration here. But you hear that open A string and then that G to A on the D right there for the that first part of the riff. Just think of like Ted Nugent's Stranglehold. That's kind of what's going on there in a way. And then you're basically playing, after the single note riff with that open A string. And right there it's an E minor 7. And then it's an F major 7, like that. And then it's C major 7, like that. and then B flat major 7, and then you end up on that partial E minor 7. So the chords right there are interesting because that's the changes I was talking about. E minor 7, F major 7, C major 7, B flat major 7, and then that little part of E minor 7 right there. So if you slow it down and clean it up, it almost sounds like jazz. And then when you dirty it up and rock out, it sounds like Hocus Pocus. Like that, and you just kind of move right through that progression. Then go right back to that single note riff with the open A. Then the second pass here, it's basically E major, F major, D major, and then B major to E major. So he is playing like major chords. He just turned all those chords he played the first time around into major chords there. And then go right back and play the first riff again with the chord changes like that. And then play the second part with just the major chords. And you're going to double that numerous times. And then finally the big payoff here, this A, C to D power chord. And then D, F to G. And then end with that little part of E minor 7 again right there. And then it basically starts yodeling right after that. So get ready to yodel, but that's a kick-ass riff and a classic. Next up's the song Anonymous. This came from the first Focus album, Focus Plays Focus. I think the US release is known as In and Out of Focus, but that's the same album. And Anonymous is this like funky flute Jethro Tull sounding thing. And then the guitar starts doing these chord hits like this. And there's funky flute right there, and then you wait, and then you do it again. And there's funky flute, and you wait, and then you do it again. And guess what? There's funky flute, and you pause right there, and then you hit it again. So definitely check out that flute action. That's really cool. And then this is really simple, just banging out like a G minor there. And then it's F major. And then back to that G minor. And then it's B flat to C, like B flat major, C major. And then end on that G power chord right there, like that. And then you pause, and you do it again. So pretty basic and short and sweet, but that's the riff from Anonymous right there. Next up's a section from the song Eruption. This is also from the album Moving Waves, and not to be confused with Eddie Van Halen's Eruption, that's a different song. But this is that like high-pitched, like guitar keyboard kind of riff, like this. And there's like a single note kind of melodic thing, guitar and keyboard, and then eventually it comes back again. So it's really unusual because usually you don't see power chords way up there. Like we're on the B and the high E with that F sharp 5 right there. So think of an F sharp power chord, but not this one and not that one. It's that one, like way up there. And he's doing this little and then right there, like you're basically playing like an E flat. Then you're going to basically do the same pattern right there. And you're ending up on that C5 way down there. So one more time there. And then you got this little redoing this F to E flat to that A flat. And it ended up on that D5 right there. So that's a really unusual, riff, and unusual song, and I grabbed it because, like I said, you don't normally see people playing power chords way up there on top, but that's really unusual. Okay, next up's another section from the song Eruption. This is a very long song, and this is that really bizarro, strange interlude that makes a few appearances. The first time it's played fast, the second time it's played slow, and it's all partial implied chords and very odd. but that's why I grabbed it. I was like, hey, that's strange, let's learn it. Something like this. And then you hear it again, and it's played painfully slow, the exact same thing. Assembly of notes and partial chords there. So Jan's basically doing this implied like diminished 7 arpeggio, but he's doing it in fourths. Because he's doing that. And then... So that's really weird right there, and you're finger rolling, right? That's the first pattern, and after that, let's do it again. And start right there. And then... That's really weird. Right. That's the second pattern, and then the last one here... So I would actually recommend playing through that and learning it the slow way first. And I suspect maybe that's what they did when they wrote this. Like maybe Jan came up with it and then they worked on it as a band, playing it really slow. And then they just added that to the riff. I'm guessing. I don't know if that's actually what happened. But that's what I heard when I kind of listened to it. I was like, you know, maybe they learned it that way and they just played it as a band really slow. Admit that's really out there, that's really weird, but I liked it. I was like, yeah, that's cool. And the fact the exact same thing's repeated, you know, painfully slow is just interesting. You know, so definitely I would practice it and learn it that way. Just do it real slow. Grab a Q-tip and clean those ears out, because that's really out there. Next up's the song Sylvia from the album Focus 3, and we're doing something like this. We're starting with this really high partial F right there. And then that's part of C major right there. Think of like that 70s kind of inversion, but we're doing that. And then it's part of G right there. And then E flat major. And then it's part of A flat major right there, like that 70s inversion, but A flat to E flat to a B flat major right there. So it's interesting to hear like riffs with those partial chords like that. That's kind of a lost art in today's, you know, world. But there's a lot of songs that have those kind of upper, you know, triads and partial chords and stuff in the riff. That's really cool. Next up's the song Mother Focus from the album Mother Focus. And this actually starts on an acoustic guitar, and then eventually you hear an electric and acoustic together. I'm just going to play all this on electric guitar. But Mother Focus is something like this. Something like that, so kind of short and sweet here. Low E open, and then we're playing basically part of a B minor 7 right there, like that. And then it's part of A major, like A major over E. And then you hear kind of a percussive strum and then a cowboy E major down there. And then you hear that busy, you know, kind of like hammer-on riff right there. And you you just basically repeat that whole riff again right there. Okay, last but not least is the song Answers, Questions. Questions, Answers. This is from Focus 3. At least I think I'm pronouncing that song title right. There's question marks and exclamation points everywhere. And as you could probably guess, this is a very odd song, but I grabbed it because I was like, man, this is weird. But something like this. Something like that. This is all over the place and very random. And it starts with like this B minor blues kind of riff, and the bass and the guitar are doing it together. Like that. And then do the exact same thing, but now it's D minor blues, and do that C to D and do the same riff right there. And go back to that B minor blues twice. And then right there it goes into minor pentatonic madness. It's like A minor pentatonic here. And we're just doing... And then... So that's that first riff. And then do the first part, like the first half again. And then go up a half step for that next part. And then go up another half step and do the first part. And then go up another half step and do the second part. So that whole thing right there is just bizarro craziness where it's like, wow, okay. When you finally get up to that C right there, that's where you hear this B flat to C power chord, and it's just like a funky, C minor 7 kind of bashed around. And eventually you hear like these hits, and he's going all the way up to E flat, so that C minor 7 to like D flat minor 7, D minor 7, E flat minor 7, like that. And then you're doing the same riff in E flat minor 7 like that. Like that E flat minor 7 and then that D flat power chord to E flat power chord. So I mainly grabbed that because it's so unusual and weird, and you don't really hear anybody making music like that anymore, where it just kind of goes off on these like tangents or whatever, where it's like, where are we going? I like this, but it's really bizarre. Really cool stuff. Alright, that's going to wrap this episode of Chordplay with this look at the Chords of Focus. Definitely a very interesting and unique and unusual band. I mean, their biggest hit has yodeling in it, so that should give you some indication or at least a clue, like, okay, this is not going to be a normal, typical rock and roll experience. There's going to be something different going on. You're going to hear yodeling and flutes and classical and this kind of avant-garde, you know, compositional style and stuff. Really interesting, like taking chances and not worrying about, you know, pop hits or the Billboard charts or whatever. Just really pleasing yourself as a musician and the musicians around you, and kind of flexing your muscles like, hey, check this out or listen to this, you know. And I like that, where it's not the same old thing. I'm tired of hearing the same old thing where it's like, hey, this sounds like a copy of something else I've already heard. But for me, I want to hear something I haven't heard before. I want to play something I haven't played before, or learn something I haven't learned before. And, you know, going back and checking out some of these kind of quirky, strange, you know, prog rock bands, which I love, you will find those different paths and different ideas floating around where it's like, yeah, this is what I'm looking for. I'm tired of that same old thing. So anyway, leave some feedback and comments. Please subscribe to Night Lessons, and I'll be back before we know with more content and material. Thank you.